Hey everyone, some announcements at the head of this episode. First of all, we are now on Instagram at I Think Therefore I Slam Podcast. Give it a follow. There's going to be all kinds of fun little previews and content and clips going up there. Secondly, if you're in Melbourne and you're looking for a Melbourne Slam event, you can head to melbournepoetry.com. I'm now putting a link to the site at the bottom of each episode description. They've carved out a niche as the go-to directory for events around Melbourne, so check it out. And lastly, please tell others about this podcast. We're in the early stages, but I'm so excited to see where this goes. But it starts with you. It starts with you making people aware. So please share with someone that you think would like it. If you're on Spotify, give the show a rating. There's also a Q&A for every episode asking you what you liked most about that. So chuck in an answer. If you're on Apple Podcasts, you can, of course, give a rating and write a review as well. I really appreciate the love and the engagement. Support local art, not just this thing, but all our artists that we have on the show. Support them in the same way that we support the big guns. We're all going to make the world a better place and a more interesting place.
Slam poetry.
He doesn't care if it's perfect.
It's time to slam now.
It's the biggest poem I've got inside of me.
She was a thief. You got
To love means to love a haunted house.
yelling, angry.
Blood-black nothingness began to spin.
Specific point of view on
To
things.
this day, I hate pork chops.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Well done, everyone. You made it. You made it to the sanctuary, the safe space. You may have been on the internet being stalked by Hawk-Tur memes all week, but now you're okay. You're okay. They can't get you here. My name's Andrew. Welcome to I Think Therefore I Slam. Listeners, have you noticed that a strange phenomenon is happening with these episodes? Whenever a spoken word artist gets name dropped on this show, they tend to come on the show as a guest just a few weeks later. This is something that happened with KJ, and this is something that definitely happened with today's guest, which is very special. So I thought I'd take 2 seconds to just throw a couple of other names out there into the ether, and we'll see what happens. Joel McCarrow, Anna McGann, Rob Waters, Joanne Yang. There we go. How's that for a start for you? Let's see if that bears some fruit. In introducing today's guest, I'm actually going to cheat and introduce them using the About the Author section in their latest book, which we will get into. Thabani Tshuma is a Zimbabwean writer and performance poet based in Naarm. His work can be found in publications such as Dichotomi magazine, Next in Colour, CUBBY Art, Cordite Poetry Review, and ABC Artworks Slammed. Thabani is co-curator of Thin Red Lines and recipient of a 2019 Hot Desk Fellowship at the Wheeler Centre. He's a featured author with Jed Press. In 2019, he was Slammalama Ding Dong's 2019 Grand Slam champion, ranked among the top 50 slam poets worldwide at IWPS 2019, and winner of all major awards at the 2019 Melbourne Spoken Word Prize. Writing is the aperture through which he views the world and experiences self in relation to others. Thabani Tshuma, what an honor to have you a part of the show. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you for manifesting me into the episode.
I sure did. Episode 1, chalked it up. And I think I was a bit bashful. I said, I'll work up to it. I haven't got the nerve to ask Thabani yet, but it's happened and I'm glad it has.
And here we are.
You've even warmed up for this because you said you were out in the field doing some podcasting of your own today. Is that right?
Yeah, just interviewing a couple of people. So it's nice to kind of have that flipped and be on the other side. And
I can imagine.
Having to ask the questions. I actually prefer answering questions than I do asking them.
Nice.
So I'm in the perfect position.
Beautiful. No, it's good to have you here. And hopefully you can give me some pointers on my question game maybe a little bit later.
Flawless.
Let's dive into your first piece that you've prepared for us tonight, mates. Did you want to intro this at all?
Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this piece at a point that I was getting really frustrated with poetry and the performance side of it. Yeah, I feel like that's all I need to say about it before it.
No
and
problems.
then maybe we can talk about it more after.
Sounds good.
And the piece is called Not a Poet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A standing ovation cues the curtain call. Then the curtains fall. I'm supposed to exit stage left, right? That's house, right? Right? This one's on the house, right? Complimentary, right? Oh, right. You're complimenting me. Well, this is a little awkward or repetitive or redundant, right? Oh, right. It's this again. He always does the meta thing, the poem about the poem that knows that it is a poem, and the irony of when he first called a poem a piece and realized just how many were missing. Not quite a person, you're a jigsaw anthology stitched together haphazardly, unedited, a walking metaphor boxed into a bad punch. Line, a tad too trite or tried, lost on a tongue tip next to words you just can't quite capture, can you? Up Schitt's Creek with no canoe and a no-can-do attitude. Don't call me a poet unless you mean it. They always say they love you, but don't mean it. It's not really a crime. It's more misdemeanor than felony, all epitaph and elegy with the hymnal assonance of a song sung to a stained glass cathedral backdrop. A crowd of grave faces watch you deliver your own eulogy. They say they always loved your voice, but don't talk much about the words. I wonder why. I wonder, will I die in these dulcet timbre tones as these lips drip honey gold, as the poet becomes historian, activist, therapist, part-time performing artist, archivist, and just kind of sick of it? Logic says, give up. So naturally you submit for publication, water it down for the placating, amp it up for the controversy, mix it up to sound the same but a little different. You're chasing after fame in all of its glorious iridescence. If you blink, you might miss it. I blink. The auditorium is empty. I'm not me anymore. I'm just a poet, right? I'm just this poem, right? Just a piece in pieces, right? I just wanted to say it right. Right? So why aren't they clapping?
Well, there's at least one person clapping. It's me. Probably
whenever I perform that piece, like the end is always so awkward because I'm not like, oh, now people feel like they have to clap. Because if they don't, it's awkward. And I feel awkward. It's the whole thing.
You painted them into that little meta corner. I really love that, mate. And I feel like you've given me a lot to work with here. You said you wrote that at a point where you were feeling frustrated with poetry. I'm interested to see what you mean by that. Yeah.
I guess it wasn't poetry per se, but more the title of poet, which is also like the title of artist. It's like, what does it actually mean? And what does it make you? And what can it do? I think that's what I was kind of reconciling with. And it's something that I still think about a lot, is what is the function of the poet? And is it something that everyone is? And is it something that no one is? You know, that thing of like, if everything's art, nothing's art. And I felt like my poetry wasn't doing anything, which is like also a bit narcissistic because it's like, what's it supposed to do? Yeah. Is it supposed to be changing the world? But I think a lot of the feedback that I was getting was not really critical, which was something that I really wanted.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted to become a better writer, I wanted to become a better poet. But all the feedback that I was getting was like, and it sounds like such a wanky problem to have. It's like, I was just getting all this praise and all these great feedback.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, even if you're gonna give like positive feedback, I wanted to know like what it is. What about the poem did you like? What parts spoke to you?
Mm.
Like more than just, oh my gosh, that was so good. You're so amazing. Wow, gave me chills, you know? I wanted like audiences to engage with my poetry more.
Yeah.
And create more of a dialogue. Because I think for me, my favorite part about poetry or art in general is the dialogue that it creates and the conversation that it creates. So I felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. It's like I create something, I share it, it's received, and then it ends there. I wanted it to evolve and grow. And in as we engage with art and as it's interpreted, as we talk about it, it becomes a part of you. And I think that's something that I'm still trying to make happen. It's like art that's not just for its own sake kind of thing. Does that make sense? I don't know. I ramble a lot.
No, I get it. I think there is a big difference between a generic platitude. You mentioned people saying, that was so good, that gave me chills. And actually, when someone got what you were going for, do you know what I mean? And they said, they might zero in on a very specific part and say, oh, I saw what you did there, or that part really moved me. That reminded me of something in my own life, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when things get taken to the next level.
Yeah.
Because if you feel like yourself or your art is not being understood on the level that you want it to, it can feel quite shallow when that stuff crosses your path.
Mm.
So what do you want your art to do? You mentioned that you thought it was a bit of a narcissistic thought to think that art should be doing something, but let's indulge. What do you want your work to be doing?
Great question. And it's weird because I say I wanted to do something, but I'm like, I don't know what I would want it to do.
Do you think you'll know it when you see it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I've probably seen it, but it's like, how do I describe it? Because I feel like I've created things that have done what I wanted them to do, even like on what I wanted, even if that desire is even on a completely unconscious level. Like I've made stuff that I'm like, yeah, super proud of, and it's served the function that I hoped. But what is that function? I think it's to let people see themselves in the art is not the entire goal, but it's a big chunk of it. And I think that's to get meta. That's because that's what the art that resonates with me the most is stuff where I can see myself in it or parts of myself. They're the ones where I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm here for that. So I think if my work can show people parts of themselves, then it's done what? It's served. Served a function.
Yeah, that's good. No, thanks for outlining that. I think there's also like a big push and pull tension between trying to find intrinsic reward in what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's so easy, and we all do it, to get stuck in the trap of, I'm doing this for what I think the reaction will be from other people. And so many times you can't control that. People are drawn to things that you might not value, and people sometimes shun things that are the most valuable to you. So how are you going with trying to find that balance? Do you feel like when you're in the zone, there's nothing else you'd rather be doing? Or, yeah, what's that like for you?
And I think that's such a big part of why I wrote this piece and other pieces. I got into this phase of like writing a lot of poems about like performance and about poetry.
The meta.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
Because I was just getting so frustrated with the commodification of art. And it's stupid because we live in a capitalist framework of social operation. And art kind of becomes a currency and a commodity, and it becomes something you can get paid for. and it becomes something that's awarded. And I went from just making poems for the sake of making poems to making poems for competitions, and making poems to try and get them published. And that, yeah, it put me in this very frustrating headspace where it comes back to the question of like, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this because, yeah, like us, it's like, do I just love this, or do I love what it can give me? Which is also weird in arts because it's like severely underfunded. So it's not like I'm gonna make $1 million from a poem.
Yeah.
And it's also what's the aspiration? That was just like a weird head trippy thing. Which I think now I just do things now because I like poems and I like performing. And I no longer really care about if it makes money, great. But I'm like, whatever. Let's just do it because it's fun.
Just keep it simple. And I think there's a lot of valuable wisdom there. I mean, it's so easy for us to look at you, Thabani. It's so easy for me to look at you. I'll make this individual. And I think you are so gifted. And I think I really revere your work. And I was so thrilled when you agreed to come on. But along with that comes all these other projections about, oh, he must feel this way about having this achievement or whatever. And what's refreshing is I keep talking, as I talk with more and more spoken word artists, we're all facing the same things. Like we're all
100%.
facing, this thing of like, why am I doing this? We're all facing, oh, I don't feel like I belong here. We're all facing, we're all looking up to someone else and going, I could never, or they would never, this kind of thing. So I appreciate you just being real and saying that you're still looking for your bliss and looking for the best way to do the thing that you do so well.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's it. So origin story time. Woo. How did Thabani Tshuma end up as a spoken word artist? How did you get started?
Luck. A whole lot of luck.
Oh, okay.
It's weird let me think about it. I've always written like as far back as I can remember, as long as like I've been able to write. But before I was writing poetry, I was writing music.
Oh, wow.
So in high school, I was in a band.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't really make much music.
Okay.
But we made a couple songs, and like on GarageBand, on like the old Macs, would like play and make beats. But then also in high school, I took my first poetry class. And that's when I made the connection of, okay, these are kind of very similar forms. It's like the building blocks of a song are not very different from the building blocks of a poem. There's still stanzas or verses, that kind of structure. You use those literary tools like rhyme, alliteration, assonance, blah, 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 like all those. And that's when I was like, okay, so I've been writing songs, but I've also technically been writing poems. And then I didn't write poetry for a long time or music. So I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, but not for me. And then in like 2017, I want to say, that's when I stumbled on the work of Saul Williams, who's an incredible poet, musician, just multi-hyphenate individual. But he was really instrumental in like bridging hip hop and spoken word. Yeah. And blending the two together and kind of normalizing, making spoken word more cool, I guess, which obviously led me down like the button poetry rabbit hole. And then I was like, oh, okay, so this is the thing that people do. Like people perform poems. And then I like Googled place in Melbourne. And that was Afro Hub, which is no longer running, but it was the most phenomenal place. And then I went to one of their open mic nights and they gave me a feature after that. And then the rest, as they say, is history. Because it was like, went to the Afro Hub, and this was like all in the space of. A lot of people don't realize this. Is like I only started doing like spoken word performance in like 2018,
Yeah.
and then I did like the Melbourne Spoken Word Prize and Slammer, and I did like all these things just like in the space of like a year, and it was super crazy, but super cool. But yeah, I just stumbled into it and was like, I really like this, and then just kept doing it, and now I keep doing it.
The band plays on. Very good.
Yeah.
You had that kind of joy of discovery of a brand new art form. Going, hey, this is tangentially related to something that I'm into or something that I've got some experience in. And you dove in headfirst and kind of found your voice, found your tribe, found your people, whatever it is, kind of thing. I was talking to you beforehand. You grew up in Zimbabwe and you moved to Australia after high school, you were telling me. What are your memories of growing up there?
Mostly school, weirdly enough, because I was in boarding school from grade 1, which is like when you're 6.
Yeah.
So literally 99% of my memories are just from school and spending time at school. School was a wild, boarding school, wild.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of all boys, but kind of not. There was like a girls' campus, like 5Ks away.
Oh, classic setup.
And then the senior girls would like come over for lessons because they didn't offer like the higher education courses at the girls' school because patriarchy. And yeah, so I just remember a lot of being at school, a lot of the friendships I made in school. Yeah, the school experience. It's wild.
That's so good. Have you ever considered going back to your old school or something and kind of bringing this thing that you're doing now to there?
Absolutely not. I've fled.
You fled. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you, but yeah, it's whether you want to do it or not.
They would love you. You know, they love alumni.
Yeah.
But I'm always like, oh, so now you want to love me, huh? Didn't love me when I was there, but now you want to love me. Okay. So I'm too petty to ever go back.
That's fair enough. There'll be plenty of people out there that feel the same way. I want to get into a few of these things that were in your About the Author. So I first came across you at the 2019 Melbourne Spoken Word Prize, where, you absolutely swept the floor with all the major awards. Do you remember much about that night? Because I keep talking about it with guests and they're like, I don't remember anything.
I remember absolutely nothing.
Wow.
I couldn't tell you who was there. I couldn't tell you who performed. I couldn't tell you what they performed. I can tell you about my performance because that's all that I thought about and all that I saw and since that's the only, because I don't think I've seen any other like footage from that besides my performance. So that literally my performance is all I remember about that night, and the intensity of it, the feelings, the thrill, the rush.
I do remember your piece. I think it's called Strings. Is that right?
Yeah.
No
strings.
No strings. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Deserving winner. Really captured the imagination of the audience. And I mentioned that it was a huge night for me because I didn't really have any context for what the wider spoken word community in Melbourne was like. So I was feeling very out of place and had to go last. And you've all heard the story by now. But it just stands out in my mind as a really special night. Maybe the reason that we can't recall much is just because, I don't know, it was a few months before COVID and we know how that's absolutely messed with everyone's memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. Maybe that's it. We'll just put it
sense
up to
of
that.
everything.
Yeah. Tell me about Thin Red Lines. It says here you're the co-curator of Thin Red Lines. I actually don't know anything about that, so I'd like to know more.
Oh, okay. So Thin Red Lines is a poetry showcase. So it's a gig, basically. It's a gig that I co-curate with George Cartus, my partner in rhyme, as I like to call them. And I guess we started it because both George and I are performers, and we were finding there wasn't a place that we could see like an artist's full body of work. Either you go to a slam where max you'll see 3 poems by the person, or you'll go to an open mic and just see 5 minutes, or if they're a feature, you'll see 20 minutes. But we kept saying all these like really, really great performers and writers and poets that were like, I just want to see more of your stuff, and I want to give you a place to play and do more experimental, weird, wild, and wacky stuff. And we couldn't find a place, so we made one. So the Thin Red Lines format is we pick 4 features. There's no open mic. It's just a night of curated performances, and we give them like 20 minutes to half an hour each. So literally, the night goes for like 2 hours, but it's just like juicy chunks of people's work where they can try, like we encourage them to try new stuff, bring works in progress. Like it doesn't have to be a curated, cut and polished set. You can just bring a bunch of work that represents you and who you are as an artist. And that's what we want to share and see. Yeah. So we've been doing that for like 5 years now.
Sick.
And it is the coolest gig in all of NARM. Yeah. So we do it every few months. So we only have like 4 gigs a year.
Yeah. So it's really focused.
Really, yeah. Because we only do it every 3 months. We just can't be bothered doing like all the admin of event coordination. But then we're also like really mindful in our curatorial process and try to pair artists whose work can potentially like be in conversation with each other or be contrasting each other. And we never know how it's going to go, but so far it's always been amazing. Because it's like you can conceptually visualize, okay, this person does this kind of thing and speaks about this kind of thing. Maybe if we put them with this person, it'll make something new. And that's always my favorite part, is like seeing what kind of new connections arise and like, new vibes are created as the night unfolds and as poets and writers come together. And there's also like a breakdown between page poetry and stage poetry. It's like you don't have to be one or the other, or even a poet. Like we had just people who just call themselves writers.
Yeah.
Which is something that always annoyed me, is just like all the different labels people have for like all the different things. It's like, chuck them all in the bin.
Yeah.
They're useless. Let's just make really dope things. But yeah, love Thin Red Lines. It's great.
I think having it quarterly as well can help keep it special. It can be something that ensures the sustainability and the longevity and the quality. And you're right, in that 25, 30-minute set is, very generous. It gives a lot of leeway for people to try things. What are some ways that some of your featured artists have taken that and run with it? What kind of out-of-the-box things have you seen attempted?
A lot of interactivity.
Yeah.
Whether it's just like crowd participation or like digital participation. We've had some really cool like interactive digital stuff. And I guess just trying new things, I think, is also something that's been really cool to see artists do, and just be like, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to try it anyway. And it always goes really well. So I don't know why people are nervous. Why do we get nervous as performers? Because it always goes well.
Yeah. Oh, look, a lot of people ask me when I'm on stage, oh, do you get nervous? And I go, yeah, absolutely. But I've got a context for those nerves.
Yeah.
I know the wells that my mind will go to. Mostly it's about what will happen if I lose control of my legs somehow or whatever. Or, I don't know, have a wardrobe malfunction or something along those lines. It's always like social embarrassment stuff.
Yeah.
And I've done it enough that I kind of know the song and dance. So, you can make those butterflies fly in formation, if you like. Do people like improvise things at all?
I feel like we've had a couple people improvise. which is always really cool because I'm one of those people who doesn't have an improvisational bone in my body.
Oh,
I could never, I lie. I could, and I have. But I could never is probably not the right word. I have never
yeah.
done like a full performance where it's improvised and I just have no idea what I'm going to say or do. What I have done is tried to memorize a piece and forgotten it halfway through and then just made it up as I go and just see what happens. And that was great. The first time that happened was actually in the first Melbourne Spoken Word Prize that I did.
Okay.
So I was like that was the 2018 one. And I got an honorable mention, which I thought was cool for someone who forgot for my first competition where I forgot my words and just made up the rest of the poem.
Yep.
I thought it was pretty cool to win an honorable mention. But it taught me that no one knows what your performance is going to be. And I think that moment was one of the most freeing moments of like, failing at a performance. Because I was like, oh, like in my head, I was like, oh no, I totally screwed it up. But the reality was no one even noticed.
Yeah.
And even people I spoke to after, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot my words, but just pretended like I didn't and kept going and just I couldn't tell you what I said, but I just said things that relatively aligned and maybe rhymed.
Nice.
And yeah, since then, it's something that's stuck with me as, no one ever knows what you're going to perform. So you can just do whatever and you can't really make mistakes because it's art. There are no mistakes in art.
Maybe that's a goal.
Where I was going. Yeah.
That's right. Maybe that's a goal where you can write a piece where you deliberately forget something or you make it seem like you forget something. I blanked recently at a wordcraft night, first time in a long time. And it was great. I'm actually glad it happened because, it just helped take the sting out of it a bit. All those, like I said, fantasies that you get before you go on stage of what would it feel like if I forgot what I was about to say. I drew attention to it. I checked my notes, got back on track. It was fine. So I don't know, maybe once or twice a year, I just need to have that kicked back into me and maybe then I'll be okay.
Yeah, keeps us humble.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So zooming out now, this about the author that I've been reading is from your first poetry collection, The Gospel of Unmade Creation, which I absolutely inhaled in about half a day when I picked it up. I wanted to finish it before I had you on.
Oh, shucks.
We had some people who've talked on the show about self-publishing, but for this one, you actually worked with a bit more of a traditional kind of publishing house. I'm interested to hear what that was like.
It was great because I feel like recent work is it falls in this weird pseudo space of publishing where, because they're like a small independent press, they don't get sucked into the toxicity of like big pub. It's, even though it's through a publishing house, it feels more self-published and more grassroots and more and like Shane, who I worked with editing the book, was just lovely to work with. I think I got lucky because just through my day job, I've worked with many different editors, and it's always my favorite thing is working with a good editor and an editor who understands you. And I think Shane was that for me. And it was really, it's really beautiful to have look at the work through different eyes, if that makes sense, and see how it could be translated into a book. And particularly with the pieces that were performance pieces, or even I'd done them as performance pieces, not necessarily written them as performance pieces, but my familiarity with them was as performance pieces, even if the intention when I first wrote it wasn't to be performed, but just because I ended up performing it multiple times, it in my head became a performance piece, and thinking about how that could translate on a page, and if it's possible, and how we can do that so it doesn't like lose the sting of the poem.
Yeah.
Was really cool. But yeah, recent work, nothing but praises for them. But then on the flip side, which nothing to do with recent work, but I think more to do with me and general publishing a book, I think it was such a goal of mine for the longest time that when I finally got it, I was like, oh, now what? I remember the day I had to go to work the morning after my book launch, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, I have a book out, but I still have to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, this is true.
So literally at the end of the launch, I was like, oh man, I should probably go home. People were like, oh, are you staying out to celebrate? I'm like, no, I'm going home. got an early morning tomorrow. So I don't know. I think I had put it on a higher pedestal than in my head than the reality of it. And I'd hoped, it's weird to think about because I don't even know what I thought I would get from having a book published. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what I wanted. If we're looking at goal setting and I was like, okay, why did you set this goal? There's no real reason. There was nothing that I was like, okay, it wasn't like a scenario where it's, okay, when I have published a book, it will mean this kind of thing. But I do know that when it happened, I was like, oh, I thought this would be more exciting than it is. Okay, I guess just back to business as usual type thing. So that was a really interesting experience to just be like, oh, I guess it's not as hype as I thought it was. Coming to terms with that, yeah.
It is a fantastic book. I did hear someone compare releasing a book to like pissing on a tree and like marking it as territory and being like, yeah, this is my tree. But then you lift your head and you go, oh, I'm in a forest. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't take away.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't take away from the fact that it's your tree and it's cool and whatever. But I loved how you just relayed that story of, come the next morning, it was business as usual. You marked the moment and now it's on to the next thing or routine or what have you. But it's got the No Strings poem in it. I really enjoyed Jungle Book. Tell us about the title, The Gospel of Unmade Creation. I think that's a line in one of the pieces. Is that right?
That is correct. Oh, look at you. Go off. Yeah, because I think that's
provocative.
Yeah. It's provocative. No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's gold.
Because the gospel aspect is not in a biblical sense, but in a literal sense of gospel just meaning like good spell, like good truth, basically, good story.
Yep.
So it's just like the story of unmade creation. Because I love the origin story segment because I think of the book as an origin story.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm like obsessed with comic books and pop culture.
Talk about this then. Dorian, Manticore, and myself had a good geek out on comics, so we'll earmark that. Go on.
So I like to think of the book as a year one of the titular character, because that's where you learn to like be the hero. For people who don't know what a year one is, like in comic books, the year one is literally the first year of being a hero or in your story arc where you haven't like found your groove, you don't really know what you're doing, and you're kind of just like still figuring it out. Your costume is very DIY. You're not yet like the hero, but you're still learning. So that's for me what like the entire book is about, is that learning. And you have to take yourself apart to make yourself into something new. And I guess that's the unmade creation aspect of it, because I think of self as a creative project, but it's one of those that doesn't have, like, it can never be finished, which is almost like a poem. It's like, when's the poem really finished? Because it's something that you can work on indefinitely, but the hard yards and like the chunkiest bits of work are when you take it apart and be like, okay, look at the pieces. What goes here? What goes there? What goes there? So the book is taking myself apart and putting myself back together. And I say myself, but it isn't. It is and it isn't, which is like a weird paradox.
Well, the whole title is a tautology, unmade creation.
Yeah, unmade creation. Yeah.
It's okay for things to be and not to be as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And also that was like a weird thing about publishing the book, is because it's quite old, if you think about it. Like a lot of the pieces are between, okay, so the book came out in 2023, but like 2023, there was about a year and a half of just working on the book with Recent Work Press. So that takes us back to 2021. And I think I finished the manuscript in 2020. So this is like me from 3 years ago that people are reading. So it's a weird time, blah, 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 don't know the word, to have this book that's kind of about me, but it's like about me from 2018.
Yeah.
So it's about a version of me that no longer exists. So it's like in publishing the book, it's an unmade creation of its own.
My take as well is that, on a cellular level, right? I think it's every 7 years thereabouts that every cell in our body is replaced. Some more often than that, but about every 7 years you kind of shed a skin and you get another one. So in a way, we all have unmade creation in us because we're changing.
Yeah.
And because we are never complete. I definitely used to have an idea that I would reach some life stage or cross some rite of passage, I'd be solid and I'd be kind of set. Do you know what I mean? But I'm realizing that no, I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still making it up. I think that really taps into the fact that you're almost presenting some pieces of 6 or 7 years ago to Barney and saying this is what was going on inside. So you're saying this is the first of a trilogy potentially, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because I think also, as a lover of comic books, I love a serial story. I feel like I don't stand alone things. I like everything to be in a series. So I can envision this as a trilogy, but not in the linear sense and not even following me. Because, I feel like the second book won't overtly use me as like the speaker of most of the poems. Because I think that's something and it's not something I do anymore, which is so interesting. I feel like that's been my favorite part of engaging with the book, is I'm reading it as a different person and I'm like, who is this? Because I don't write like this book anymore.
Yeah.
It's almost surreal, like how removed I am. Like obviously I still connect with like the emotive elements, but I'm so removed from that writing style that it's weird to look at, and I'm like, oh, that's not me at all. But I want to see where that story goes and where the thread goes, because it doesn't end in this book. And even like at the end of the book, it's not an end of a book. You don't close this book and be like, oh yeah, that's the end of the story. So there's still more to explore and more to unpack. So stay tuned for book 2.
Oh, we're excited. We're shaking in the boots for it. if
Yeah.
that's the expression. I don't know. I want to dive a bit into some of the themes of the book. But before we do that, let's take a little tangent into comic book pop culture land. There's plenty we could talk about there. Speaking of year one, was it Frank Miller's Batman year one? Was that the first one to do the reimagined simplified origin?
Simplified, to my knowledge.
Yep.
Well, it's at least my favorite one.
Yeah.
My favorite version of the year one.
I didn't mind the story, but I didn't actually like the font that they used. They used like this cursive font that I just found so hard to read, and it kind of put me off, if I'm serious.
Fair. I feel like font is underrated.
Yeah. What are some of your favorites? What are you reading? What has influenced you?
Saga is obviously up there.
Amazing. This was the very first one that Dorian name dropped as well. And I was like, oh my God, I love Saga. Saga is one of the best current titles out there. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, Sandman has been instrumental in my life. And I've actually recently been on a big anime binge. I obviously grew up watching anime, but I haven't been watching anime in a hot minute. And for no reason. I was just like, you know what? I haven't watched anime in like years. I'd watch like an episode here and there. But I've been watching all the like new school anime, like Solo Leveling, Kaiju Number 8, Demon Slayer, My Hero. Oh my gosh, I've been watching so much because I'd never seen any of it. And there's like 7 seasons. So I'm finally caught up to like current. It's airing now and I'm up to date. And it's so good. Yeah. And I think it's just been refreshing to get back into it. Because I think I don't know, as a storytelling medium and the narrative function or narrative structure because narrative structure of anime is a lot closer to comic books because obviously it's like drawn from manga.
Yep.
And it's very different from TV and how like TV series. And I know TV series have evolved, but I hate this period that we're in of TV where it's just like 10 episodes, just like here's 10 episodes of like a micro story. I miss 2000s TV, 24 episodes of just like nonstop stuff and tangents. I miss filler episodes and just doing side quest episodes because I feel like anime has a lot of that. It's like some episodes are just not integral to the plot. Like not everything has to be about the main story. Let's just go on this little 1 minute, one episode adventure that's just like side, completely unrelated to everything we were doing. Yeah, it's great.
Have you heard of this meme of Surf Dracula?
No. What is Surf Dracula?
I don't know where this came from. I think someone tweeted it out saying modern TV is they make a show called Surf Dracula, right? So it automatically has your attention. There's something to it. Yeah. But then the whole first season, I bet you, is just going to be learning the backstory of how Dracula ended up in a surf town. And then you never get to see him on his actual surfboard until the last 5 minutes of the season finale. And then it gets cancelled. I think you're right in that we do seem to be in another golden age, but you've just reminded me that season 3 of The Bear, I'm pretty sure, drops the day of recording. So I know what I'm doing after this. We're in another golden age, but also, that kind of prestige pilot or whatever of 20 years ago has gone away. There's definitely a lot more niches and a lot more maybe pandering as well. Yeah,
it's interesting. And I could go, it's such a rabbit hole. I feel like I was talking about this like earlier today.
Yeah.
Of kind of how streaming has changed
everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Yep. Can I just say, like Breaking Bad, when I started watching it was midway through its run. I feel like that was the last like week to week absolute like water cooler show. I felt like a madman with a corkboard with all my strings next to it. And it felt like it was made for me, mate. Yeah. And I have had that sensation somewhat. I think The Bear is extraordinary. But there was something about streaming has, commodified things further. I think cheapened things further. I think people struggle to trust creators that they're actually going to have cohesive storytelling with closure and arcs. But then if it doesn't get watched, it falls on the pile. So catch 22.
Yeah. What you gonna do?
Mm.
I would not want to be a TV writer right now.
Have you ever
But
seen
maybe I would.
Terriers?
No,
Have you heard of this show?
no.
Okay, it's got nothing to do with dogs. It's literally like a PI
Yeah,
show.
that was my first thought.
Well, this is the problem. They called it Terriers, right? It had one season on FX in 2010, got such low ratings that it got cancelled. And it was before streaming, so it wasn't like it was going to get picked up by someone else. But I just love the writing. It's like Veronica Mars meets Big Lebowski, kind of small town conspiracy banter, but also, I don't know, it just felt like really lived in. So I just wonder where those shows are. I feel like they're getting rarer and rarer.
Yeah. Bring them back.
Bring them back.
Let's make it happen.
I mean, you know, some things like Terriers and like Firefly, I think they can be laid to rest. I don't really want to see them revived or whatever.
Revived, yeah.
Things in that.
Let them have one season wonder.
Yeah, things in that ilk would be nice. Quickly returning to Sandman, I've got the first few compendiums. So what am I in for? I haven't started it yet.
Oh my goodness. You're in for the greatest graphic novel experience of your life.
Okay.
And arguably one of the greatest literary experiences of your life. I feel like for me, Sandman made me take graphic novels seriously as a format.
Yeah.
Because the way that Neil Gaiman puts it together is just so cohesive and so suited to the format. I feel like that's the thing that really struck me. It really got me thinking of, wow, this would never work as well in any other. This is the perfect medium for this story. And it's just that synthesis of content and medium in the perfect way. And I'm like, that's how you do it. But yeah, and it's got everything. I feel like you feel the entire range of human emotion in 8 volumes or less.
Wow.
Everything is so different, and just, man, gets you thinking about yourself, gets you thinking about the world. Gets you thinking, gets you feeling, gets you seeing yourself, which, like I said, that's what the art should do. Is like, oh my God, I want to live in this world, but I do, which is another thing. It's like showing you the magic of your own world. I think that for me, that's the best kind of fantasy, is where I can remind you that like magic is real, and like the world that we're in is already magical. You don't need to go to a mystical realm to experience wonder. It's like it's right in front of your eyes. Even right now, we're literally talking through, how are we doing this? How are we recording this?
Yeah.
What?
I know.
That's insane.
It's so easy to take it for granted. Classic Dumbledore line. And he said this line pretty calmly, I think, in the book. Classic
Did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
Yeah, that's it. Classic Dumbledore line. I think in one of the books, they have some songs or some music playing at the opening feast. And he says something like, yes, music, a magic far beyond anything we could do here. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's what it's about. That's what it's about. Just sprinkled in.
And it.
Cool. That was great. Returning to...
Started immediately.
Oh, yeah. Look, my reading pile's out of control, but I will shove it to the top once I get through Transmetropolitan. So, we'll see how we go. And then there's Invincible after that.
Oh, Invincible. Oh, God.
Yeah. I've got a lot to work through. Can I throw one back at you? Dorian and I talked a lot about Chew. John Layman, are you a fan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so funny, so unique, so gross.
Which is, necessary.
Oh, absolutely. But just a Saturday morning cartoon gone rogue is how I think of it.
Yeah. I miss Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh, yeah. Cheese TV all the way. Returning to your work, one of the themes in the Gospel of Unmade Creation that comes up a fair bit is that of addiction. And I was just wondering if you're willing to share where some of that exploration comes from for you.
I guess I'm in recovery from addiction. So I've been clean and sober for like 7 years.
Yeah.
Now, which is wild to me. Where does the time go? But I think and interestingly enough, linking it back to poetry, is I didn't start writing again until after I got sober, which is where I kind of always combat that like archetype or stereotype of the drunken artist, the junkie rock star, where you have to take all these substances to access that creativity. Because for me, it was the absolute opposite. Years of addiction, I think I stopped feeling. Or I think for me, that's what addiction was all about. It was about escaping feeling.
Yeah.
And finding a way to numb out the world. Or not even numb it out, just like change feeling. I think addiction is a lot to do with control. It's like I am dissatisfied with a feeling or an experience or an emotional state, and I have this substance that can change that or give me the perception of change, you know? But ultimately for me, that just, it stripped me of any genuine emotion. And it was only when I got sober that I was able to start to feel again. And I'll never forget the first time I listened to music. Obviously not the first time I listened to music in my whole life. Like, and that's what blew my mind, because I was like, I've listened to music before. And I think it was like Radiohead or something. Like it was one of those bands, like either Pink Floyd or Radiohead.
Yeah.
And I was maybe 6 months clean, and I just like put on some headphones and couldn't tell you what song I played, but I played like a Radiohead song or a Pink Floyd song. And it was like, it felt like the first time hearing music. It's like I'd listen to it, but I could hear it, and I could feel the magic, you know, in the music. I could feel the emotion behind it. And I was like, I can engage with the art. I can connect with it. And I was like, I feel like I haven't done this in so long.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like one of the most beautiful moments. Now I'm just like chronically consume media. I was like, no. Give me all the nummy art and all the music and all the. But yeah, it wasn't until I got sober that I was able to not just access my emotions, but I think be open to receiving other people's emotions. Because I think that's an important part of art that gets forgotten, is like, when you consume something, it's literally that, like you're consuming it, you're letting in. I'm not one of those hippie people, but like, it's an exchange of energy.
Sure.
And if we look at art as self-expression, it's like in receiving your art, I am receiving an expression of you.
Yeah.
And I think there's a level of openness emotionally that you need to allow in yourself to like adequately receive that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think having that experience of other people experiencing your work allows you to appreciate what other people are doing, you know, and sharpens that a little bit. It's that whole, you know, we could talk for hours about the man in the arena or whatever, in terms of, hey, don't go criticizing other people unless you're putting out your own stuff. And it is so true. I think this isn't my first podcast, for example. My last podcast was a fun little project that I did with a friend about films, which was great.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd do differently if we did it again is that, you know, it did tap into a critical side of me. And I think I wanted, especially as I've done more creative stuff, I wanted to get into a space of more curiosity and more lifting other people up, I suppose.
Yeah.
On the theme of addiction, the best book about addiction I think I ever read was Johann Hari's Chasing the Scream, which is about the failure, really, of the war on drugs in America and the origin of it. And just got me thinking that we're in such a curious position because we all have a brain, right? We all have a reward system. It's very sensitive and it's very easy to break.
Yeah.
And it's very easy that given the right conditions, the right stressful conditions, the right hopeless conditions. I think
Mm.
we're all really vulnerable to all kinds of hang-ups and addictions. And I think we need to look after each other. And I think also pathways for people who want to change that and combat that, but also safe pathways for people who aren't necessarily ready for that. Safe use of this or that is really important, and it talks about that a lot in this book. Having gone through all that, in what ways has that, I don't know, changed your perspective about life or other people or the things that we deal with?
Oh, in every way.
Mm.
And I think it's made me a lot more of a forgiving person.
Yeah.
Or maybe forgiving is the wrong word. It's a lot more understanding.
Compassion. Yeah.
Compassionate, yeah. I feel like it's, like you said, on a level, everybody's addicted to something.
Yeah.
Because it's never about the actual behavior or the substance. It's more about what's underneath and what the perceived payoff is that we're receiving. And we're all doing things to change our emotional states or to feel better or to feel, change how we're feeling or change how we think other people will perceive it. Like we're all doing things to get things.
Yeah.
And it makes me a lot easier on myself, but also a lot easier on other people. And I think we should be a lot easier on each other, which kind of like roundabout segues into your favorite segment, cringe.
Yeah, please.
Because it's that thing of like being more forgiving and more just like allowing us to be who we are and like for me it's about allowing myself to just be who I am in a non-judgmental sense and to stop comparing myself to ideals, comparing myself to what I think I should be or who I think I should be, and just allowing myself to be. Because I feel like in the 12-step fellowship of recovery, they talk about taking things a day at a time, which when I first heard, I was like, that's stupid. How are you going to set a goal if you're doing things a day at a time? But it's more about presence, to just like be in this moment. I think that's been the biggest learning for me, because a lot of the brain chatter and a lot of the mental gymnastics that we do really goes away when we're just like in the moment and in the present. And I feel like the present is like the most non-judgmental state or place. I remember in the other episode you talked about like poets taking a moment before performing. Imagine if you could extend that moment and live in that moment. Because that moment, we take it because it's grounding, it's centering. It's a moment where there's no judgment, there's no fear, there's no anxiety, nothing has gone wrong, nothing's necessarily gone well, but it's just a pure moment. And we pull ourselves into this pure moment and then we engage with the world. But not ultimate, but mindfulness is just all about trying to extend that moment and trying to live more fully in what's happening now. Oh my gosh, I sound so like Eckhart Tolle. It's all about the now. Yep. Be in the now.
You have a pain body, and your pain body is trying to hurt you.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's good value.
Love him.
Yeah, and I think present moment, meditation, whatever, I think what it's trying to do is for you to learn how your mind likes to rev, how your mind likes to put things in boxes really quickly, in boxes, to keep you safe or to make sense of the world. And slowing that down, I guess, much easier said than done. One thing I haven't talked about on this show yet is my absolute love of float tanks. Have you ever done one of these?
I haven't, but it's been on my to-do list for the longest time.
Yeah, well, there'd be plenty of ones up your way. I think there's a nice one in Collingwood.
Yeah.
Love them, love them. I use it for like work stress a bit, but also super helpful for creativity. I mean, you can do different levels, but I turn off all the lights, I shut all the music, I close the door. There's no sensory input, and you just feel like you're not sure where your body ends and the water begins, and it's wonderful. And if I ever win the lottery, the first thing I'm going to do is buy myself a float tank.
Personal float tank.
I just love it. And I just recommend it to anyone who's maybe has a mind like mine and maybe like yours that revs, making these judgments and wants to find a little bit of that 1 hour at a time. I'd recommend it to anyone. Even if you're claustrophobic, you can do it at different spots.
Yeah.
So
I definitely want to try it.
yeah.
I just need to actually just do it. Just go to the float tank.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I highly recommend it. Well, thanks, Thabani, for diving into that topic for us. Time for piece number 2, I think.
Oh, yes. This is called Howl. And to give a bit of context, I wrote it at a time that I was interested in horror as a genre. I love horror. I'm a huge horror nerd, but I wanted to start writing slightly more horror poetry. This isn't fully a horror poem, but it has the beginnings of a horror poem. That's all. It goes like this. I saw the best minds of my generation quoting Ginsberg as scripture, clamoring in defiance to hold a beat. Their arrhythmic hearts, flawless to the fault of making gods of men. No, men were gods, but some were labeled monsters. The remainders were poorly written, misspoken into mythos on pious pages, parched by their proximity to perishing, painted villainous in the right light, in the pale moonlight. The joke was how the devil can't dance but invites you anyway, with a honeyed tongue, drowning cups, and the promise of potential power. In truth, it was the power that was corrupted, absolutely not the person, not the vessel, not the snapping limbs of transformation, not the coat of fur that punctures skin, the simple sin of palm to paw, to claws, to wow, what big teeth you have, all the better to bite and cause another to turn. The bark is in the hound dog's petty plea for bones, some to prick, some to chew to splinters, lacerating just to be consumed, internal wounds obscured in a glass house mostly made of stone, each wall a throne, as both a seat to rest a crown and an altered tense to keep closeness out of reach. Please don't look at me when I'm like this. Look and laugh at how he breaks the mirror despite his likeness lost to lunacy. Blood lust becomes the beast, its eyes ablaze, the beauty of the scheme, the ease at which we kill the man if first we make him monster, make him savage, make him rabid, make him hunter fit for prayer. Say your prayers, only God can save you from the sacrilege within. Purge the animal and save the person from its sin. Burn the unfamiliar, for it must be the occult, as if they do not make daily habits of shifting skin and fangs and massacres concealed by snowy fleece, deceiving sheep, never understanding the levity of curses is in their impermanence. Still, I beg the silver bullet pierce my heart for those of us who are supposedly afflicted. Dying can be the only way we are loved.
Oh, very cool. I was going to ask you in that intro whether it was a nod to Allen Ginsberg, and there it was.
Yeah.
And I was spooked out a bit, not just by the content of the piece, but also I do have an idea from ages ago, because I checked an old notebook where I had started on a riff on Howl as well. So I'm glad that someone did it justice, because I got, a bit away through it. I was like, No, I don't think I can do this, but that was cool. I really liked the direction you went in on it. I think I was talking about, I saw the greatest minds of my generation driven mad by cancel culture or something. It wasn't quite working.
Valid.
Valid, but it wasn't quite working. It was feeling a little bit unformed. Thank you for that. Okay. The creative act, the creative life, the creative pursuit. Wow. What is it? Why is it here? How do we interact with this? Do you have any tips or tricks about the way that you form ideas and pieces? Do you have a particular habit or discipline which has been helpful, or do you let things flow? What's going on in that realm for you?
I feel like I am the worst example in the world because I have no discipline. I have no routine.
Amazing.
I'm just doing things. I'm just shooting from the hip, blah, 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 and shooting, throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Because weirdly, in my day job, I'm a copywriter. So I write every day, even if I don't want to. It's literally my job.
Yep.
So because of that, I don't write creatively every day. Because like I'm fortunate to have a job where I get to write every day. And I don't know if this is just like a delusional thing that I tell myself, but I think the type of writing I do for work makes me better at creative writing.
Interesting.
Because I go back to the fundamentals that I otherwise wouldn't practice. I'm looking at grammar, I'm looking at sentence structure, I'm looking at those basic building blocks of words and writing that as you get old, like after school, you're not going to study, you're not going to go back and look at, unless you're me, and the way that you read and consume media is analytically, and you're like, oh, the sentence is so good. Why? But because of my work, I get to practice a lot of the fundamentals of writing. And I think that pushes my creative writing craft. Again, I don't know if that's just like a delusional thing I tell myself to make it okay to work. And I'm like, oh, this is good for me. But I think it comes down to the idea of practice and having a writing practice, whatever that may look like for you. Like for me, I'm lucky it looks like going to work, but it is a craft, which I don't know, it's a weird thing. Because going back to what I said earlier about like how there's that idea of like, if everything is art, nothing's art. But at the same time, there is technical elements to art.
Sure.
And you can learn technical elements to art and you can refine them and push your craft forward. I like to believe I'm a better writer than I was a year ago, because I've worked at becoming a better writer. That's, I don't know, it becomes a weird space. And it's something it's like a love-hate thing I have with, I guess, specifically the poetry community. Is it's so loving and so welcoming, but I wonder what that does for the craft. And it may sound like a snobbish thing to say. To what degree does the positive affirmation make writers better at the craft? There is a point where it does.
Yeah.
But like, when does it stop actually making you a better writer? And how can you get over that space? And like, where do you go when you want to be better? Because I look at my own trajectory and use myself as an example. It's like, when I first started writing and performing, positive affirmation was really good. I was nervous and unsure and not really confident in my writing. So that helped me get better and settle more into my own voice. But it got to a point where it was no longer helping me improve or grow as a writer. And I think that's my biggest qualm with slam. I love slam so much, and it's obviously given me so much, and I've learned so much from it. But I feel like it doesn't allow for evolution of craft, which also, like, it shouldn't have to. Like, it doesn't have to. Not everything. And, you know, that's also like a selfish perspective, because for me, I'm like, everything needs to be evolving writing and making it better and making it more like explosive, and like we need to be taking this to the next level.
Yeah.
And I inject that a lot into the way like I perceive the scene and perceive like writing. And that's why I hate being called a slam poet, because like I'm not at all. But it creates a very specific way of writing and a very specific way of performing that like boxes you into like the slam format and the slam cadence. And even if you aren't conscious of it, like spend enough time slamming, you start to sound like other slam poets and vice versa. And it all just kind of monotonously becomes just this blob of slam. But if you were to go to a slam and do something really great, but really experimental, you wouldn't necessarily excel in slam, even though what you're doing is pushing the envelope. And that's what I tried to do with like that Melbourne Spoken Word Prize piece. I was like, let me do something that's completely different and just like not like anything else.
Yeah.
But and that kind of backfired because like, oh, here are all these awards. That was great. Where in my head,
I was going to say, it was the exception.
Yeah, in my head, I went into that being like, yeah, this is going to be like my fuck you to the slam scene.
Oh, no
where
way.
I'm just like, where I just do something absolutely crazy and everyone's going to be like, huh? What is that? Why are you doing that? And then I'll just like never slam again, and that would be my last thing. But it obviously backfired completely, and they were like, wow, that's so great. Yeah, take all the awards.
Was it going to be like your Nanette?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, this is going to make you take a good hard look at what you call poetry. And yeah, I don't know.
Because you were in that piece, you had the main visual was that of a marionette, a puppet on a string.
Yeah.
And I know that earlier you spoke to your certain frustrations at the moment. Now I know you said that it sounded snobby, but I think it just speaks to your hunger and where you're at. Do you feel like there's anywhere for you to turn for, I don't know, whether you want to call it like mentoring or whatever, or does it all seem like people expect that from you, or it's more of a flat structure? There's a great equality in kind of what we're doing in the scene. I'll meet you halfway, right? I was at an open mic, which I love, and I was talking about this with my mate, but I got frustrated with like how glib and casual the hosts of the night were being, and like how they would have someone who was doing music, for example, and they hadn't done a sound check. So everyone just had to wait 5 minutes awkwardly waiting for them to set up and whatever. And again, I feel like a bit of a snob saying this, but at the same time, I'm like, I feel like this art form deserves excellence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this comes from my background a bit as a theatre kid and whatever, but I feel like it deserves excellence. And it just rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, the glibness and the casualness of the way that things were presented. Now, back again to the man in the arena thing, I don't facilitate a group, and I have never taken a course or anything. Like, hopefully there are options for those who do want to stretch themselves. Have you come across some mentorship facilitators or courses that helped you or that do appeal to you, or is this a direction you want to be stretched in?
I've done a lot of different kinds of workshops on both sides. Like I've both participated in and facilitated. And I haven't found anything that's specific to what I'm looking for. And it's hard because it's not something tangible, you know? It's not something that could be there. You know, there are workshops that are adjacent to it. Manisha Anjali does like this great dream series workshop that's kind of like about writing dreams and engaging that. And it's not like, that's not exactly what I would be looking for, but it's like adjacent to experimenting and breaking tradition, like breaking form and looking at new ways of elevating the craft, or not even elevating it, just like changing it, doing something, having
90
a
degree
play
turn.
with it. Yeah. And I think like on an experiential level, for me, so for that Melbourne Spoken Word Prize event, I had just gone to America for iWhips, and that changed my perspective. Well, not changed, but it showed me a different slam world
Yeah.
because that was coming out of the Australian slam scene,
Yes.
which is very different from the American slam scene.
Very young.
Yeah, oh, so young. Still in its infancy.
It's a baby.
Yeah, exactly. But even that, just connecting to something that has a cultural history. And even though in the same way that I've been talking about format, American slam is also very specific and there's like an American slam cadence and very American slam style that can also box you in. But I think for me, the biggest difference that I noticed was stage presence. And maybe that's just a cultural thing. Americans they're more willing to own the stage and take up that space. Whereas here, I don't know, there's more of a culture to be kind of apologetic for your performance. And so I hope you like this. I wrote this. I wrote this last night. I'm not sure if it's very good, kind of thing. Whereas Americans go up on stage and be like, "I'm the dopest motherfucker to ever write a poem. Shut up and listen." So just that shift of energy and that permission to take up the space on the stage and kind of just be like, "This is my time. This is my space. I'm gonna do me."
Yeah.
Was so freeing for me because I think I was before I went to America, I was starting to fall into kind of the Australian cultural trap of having that uncertainty and that timidness on stage. Whereas like seeing how they were doing it in America, really, it gave me permission to kind of just like take up space and be like, "Yeah, I'm here," and lean into kind of being more theatrical and just like being dramatic and just being silly.
Yeah.
And making it more of a performance.
That's cool. I can see how that would have been so valuable. And yeah, maybe I think we could definitely use some more brazenness, but it is hard. You're right in saying I think the culture is very different. Tall poppy is very real. And yet, the performers I admire or the performers or my friends or whatever, when I'm hearing what they're producing, I just want them to like back themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want them to like push it, push it real good, as the song says.
Song goes. Yeah, because they're so talented.
Yeah.
You're really good. Just like own that.
Yeah. And the provisos, they do get in the way. It's a safety mechanism,
Yeah.
It's so easy for me to be self-effacing and flippant about stuff that I do. Hey, I'll just say it, like, I'm so proud of this project. I'm so proud of this show. I'm so excited for what it's doing for people. My vision for this show, and I'm probably sharing this on the show for the first time, is that I want this to be encyclopedic, man. I want everyone on here. I want everyone to have a plaque on the wall where it's like, here is a 2-hour deep dive into me, my work, what I'm about. People come up to me and say, "Oh, I'd like to be on or whatever, but I don't think I'm at the level of this person. I don't think I have something to share." And then 5 minutes later, they'll tell me a story, a 2-minute story where I'm just like, that's it. That's the story there. That's
You're
what we go into. You had this experience. And again, we're all dealing with tall poppy, imposter syndrome, cringe. It's all there. And it's so encouraging to me. And I feel like the confidence I'm getting, not just in my work, but in my life from conversations like this is great. I think what we're taking from this, Thabani, is that this art form deserves excellence.
100%.
So I think your comments, I think they were really constructive. And I hope that they kind of land somewhere where someone can go, yeah, I think that's right. I think it does deserve excellent. It does deserve us owning the space better. Oh, you got me fired up now, mate. This is great. I've got to get to some more American slam and whatever. So are you heading back to America at any point to experience that?
No plans as yet.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. Who knows what the future holds?
Yeah. Well, as we head towards the end of the show, I do want to put you through your paces with our little turkey conundrum, as it were. Imagine you're going to a meal. It's a dinner party. It's a slam poetry dinner party. Everyone is trying to bring the turkey. And maybe the Australian version of the turkey is that kind of like self-effacing, quietly spoken, not 100% committal because we're trying to be protective. Maybe that is our turkey. And maybe we get a bit too much of that. Just saying. Everyone's trying to bring the showstopper, but it's only one flavor. So what kind of flavor and what kind of dish are you bringing to the table, my friend?
I am most certainly a dessert.
Yes.
Just something sweet to end the night with and be the last thing, be the taste that lingers. At least that's what I hope to be. I don't know. I think I'm perceived as bringing the main dish, but that's not me.
Interesting.
I'm the dessert, which can also be a main dish. I think dessert is underrated or adequately rated. I'd be like, we like dessert. Yeah, I'm dessert. Yes.
I like it. Hopefully it's the kind of dessert that, comes out on time and not at a point where everyone's way too full and they have to leave it or put it in a doggy bag or whatever.
Maybe take me home with you.
There you go. A little memento.
Save me for later.
When you look around, I'm curious because you just said that you don't feel like you're the one bringing a main dish or whatever. When you look around, who do you see around that is bringing main dish energy? Main dish energy.
Main dish energy. Oh my gosh. Dan Hogan, main dish energy. Chester Deo, main dish energy. So many people. And I love that. I love my contemporaries.
Yeah.
I feel like my reading stack lately has just been super Australian and super like contemporary. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know these people and they're putting out books and I'm reading them and they're incredible. And I could like message them on the internet and they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Because I don't know, when I was a kid consuming media I really liked, the creators of that media were always far removed. Like I'm never gonna meet the writers of Buffy, like when I'm a kid. This is what I was thinking. But now it's so cool that I have this art form and I actually know people who are making this stuff. And I'm one of them. And we're talking.
Yeah.
We're getting on podcasts with each other and we're like connected.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It brings me so much joy knowing that there's so many people around me that are doing super cool things that are so accessible. And I can just like message them and be like, hey, do you want to collab on something? Or hey, I'm having this event. Do you want to come and feature maybe? And they'll say yes. Yeah. Brings me so much joy.
And that's a few more name drops for the bucket as well. So I'm not familiar with those individuals' work, but that's exciting to hear that we got some big main
your
dish
world is about to change.
Beautiful. Just the way it is with Sandman. Quickly returning to what you said about the fact that you're constantly in the writing world, right? And that's obviously giving you appreciation for the basics and the building blocks. It's kind of like you've got that analytical bucket full, and through your work, you're able to drain that a bit. And so you're able to push past things that lead to more creativity because you've already spent the analytical stuff up. I don't know. It was just a little visual that I was thinking about. You can get past that point to the weirdness that's underneath it all.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
100%.
Yeah.
Isn't that what the source is?
Yeah.
Like the stickiness, the weirdness underneath it all.
Yeah. And people have different ways of getting to that. They'll do a head dump or they'll go out in nature or whatever the case may be. So what's next for you, Thabani? We've talked about you're working on your kind of middle chapter of the poetry collection trilogy, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
The
Godfather 2.
That's it. The
Two Towers?
Two Towers is
Two Towers?
not that good, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's good.
Well.
Sorry, it's sacrilege. It's good, but it's no Return of the King.
It's not Return of the King, exactly.
Yeah. What's next for you in the next season, you think?
I never know. Do you know, I'm one of those people that's like, if you ask me what I'm doing, I'll say nothing. But then if I look at my calendar, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing 10 bazillion things. I want to finish this book one day. I want to do more theater and act more
Yeah.
and do more stage stuff and maybe do more playwriting. So that's like a goal. I feel like speaking it into existence will manifest. So if you're casting and looking for someone to be in a play, I'm down. And yeah, just continuing and doing, I don't know, I feel like this next book that I'm working on will encapsulate this current period of being that I'm in. Because it feels like the last book, for me at least, it's not relevant
Yeah.
because it's not relevant to me. Even though for people who read it for the first time, obviously they're reading it for the first time and it's relevant to them. But for me, I'm like, it's done. That's ancient history. I don't want to look at that anymore. So I feel like this next book will be my way of engaging more with present Thabani and how I'm experiencing the world in the present. Yeah, because all that's in the book is like in the past. But I haven't really been writing to the now. And I think, yeah, I think that's something that I'm hungry for, is like an exploration of where I am now in the world.
I think it's a great foundation to build from, mate. And it sounds like you're in a really good place. You are hungry for refinement and challenge. And I think you're going to attract the right crowd of people who also want that kind of thing. And hopefully you'll drag the rest of us into whatever's next for the scene. I think it's going to be very exciting. If people want to follow you or your work, Thabani, or maybe they want to buy your book, where should they head?
Instagram is probably the best way to find me.
We'll have it in the notes.
Yeah. The book you can just get from the Recent Work Press website or wherever you get your books. If you're in Australia or Melbourne specifically, Brunswick Bound is the best place to get it. But I think it's also at Readings. I never know how to pronounce that one. Is it Readings or is it
Let's
Readings?
just leave it ambiguous. Keep some mystery in
the
there.
the R Eadings
yeah.
bookshop. Yeah. And yeah, Instagram, bookshops, the internet.
Beautiful. Thabani Tshuma, the latest book is The Gospel of Unmade Creation. It's a great read. It's got a beautiful painterly cover as well. One more piece to leave us with tonight. What's going down with this one?
This I wrote in lockdown. I became obsessed with blues music. I'd never really listened to blues before, but when I found myself with a whole bunch of time on my hands, I went back and I went through like the decades, like 20s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I think blues is now one of my favorite genres of music, just for what it means, obviously culturally for Black America, but also sonically for the world, and how blues, jazz, those kind of art forms have changed music so irrevocably. And I think, I don't know, like I said, my intro to poetry was music. So for me, they always go hand in hand. And I kind of sing a little in this piece, but I'm a terrible singer. So sorry for that. But yeah, I think it's just called Blues, or at least that's just how I saved it in my phone. If you ever go down to the crossroads, you best not say my name. Said if you ever go down to the crossroads, know that the devil, he don't play no games. Hush now. The quiet is the price we pay. The path is lonely. A one-man job with no boss. I'm a soul trader. Soak these pages in bourbon to feel the burn, the burden of bringing the real. Blues back, that electric twang on a 6-string got you thinking someone must have summoned Satan, because ain't nobody got fingers that can fiddle so fast and so smooth and so dark and so true. The hued iridescence of the too long hurt, seeking some form of redemption, a poem as a death letter. Takes the father to son's house. Backtrack it to Bobby Johnson just to take you to church. Ain't no better place for a spirit than a gin joint. Blessed by Bessie Smith. Washed in muddy waters, smoke stained in the somber tones of Miss Simone tonight. Welcome to the service, an absolution of the so-called deviled musics where we purging the sowed seeds of the earth. So greedy, they stole the dirt, they stole the sound, they sold us, made everything commercial and it all sold out. Stage stardom with the camera click of the Presley, suggesting they just forgot Big Mama Thornton, I confess. I was once nothing but that hungry hound dog, starved for scraps with a snarled snout, but I'm here barking back with a taciturn retelling, trailed on the wrong side of the track marks. If you're wondering how I got these scars, it's a trick question, you gave them to me. I'm lined with the rising scales, 12 bars and AAB and bam, you got hangman. Most woods had wolves then. Most hoods were already red, blood stains flocculent fabric fast. We learned to blend it in the colors. We're taught to pretend none of it would matter, but it all did. We called it. Where was the response? Being sorted into a sordid assortment, not as partners per se, more people turned marauders, generation of hopeful hoarders, in the way we still hold on. Are still holding on. Most things only end when they stop. Or you stop watching. Or you realize you just can't carry a tune, 'cause ain't your mama tell you? They want our rhythm, but can't handle our blues. I said, ain't your mama tell you? They want our rhythm, but can't handle our blues. Yeah.
Amazing. Straight from New Orleans to us, hey? Thabani Tshuma, it's been a great hang, mate. It's
It's been a vibe.
It has. You've been drinking.
We should do this outside of podcast.
I'd love to, man. That'd be great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Weetabix hands, what's that all about?